Welcome to the Fire from Two Windows podcast, where we take a deep dive into different aspects of the fire service. My name is Matt Humnicki, and I'm joined with my co-host Lou Cominelli. We want to express that these are our own opinions built by experiences and education while honing our craft. These are not the opinions nor directions from our various employers. We're here on our own to spur conversation and help level the playing field for all. Good morning, Lou.
Morning, Matt. How are you?
I'm well. We got special guests coming on today. Good podcast lined up. Something we've had in the works for a while, and it's just a matter of scheduling. So with that, we would like to welcome Paul Gorczyca onto the podcast. Paul?
What's going on?
Nada, man. Good seeing you.
Good to be here.
You got 23 years in the fire service.
Correct.
All right. You're currently assistant chief at Orchard Park. You work for U.S. Customs. What haven't you done?
I don't know. It's a busy life, man. Busy life.
All right.
You know, that kids, family, outside of that. So
everything.
Yeah, a lot
does
going
it
on.
all.
A lot going
Starting to see some commonality in the fire service, especially those that stand out amongst the service and those that are taking up leadership positions. And that's one of the things we like to pull in, draw contrast and show like what it's not just what makes the man, but what makes the fire service from the man, not the fire service that makes the man. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
We like to pull those ideas out. The reason why we wanted to invite you on, and it seemed like you were really engaged with this, is that you have a background, or at least you've been coming up with a specialty for EV and lithium ion batteries.
Yep.
So we'd like to get into that. But in
Sure.
order to start, let's get to know you.
Sounds good.
All right. So where are you from?
So born and raised Buffalo. That's where I kind of started my quote unquote fire service career. Been a volunteer for all 23 years. So I grew up in the city of Lackawanna, Steel City. You know, great community. Unfortunately, got hit with a lot of, I guess, economic downfall when the steel plant closed in the mid '80s. So, but living in the city, I was able to catch volunteering in the town of Hamburg. So that's where I started my fire service career. Volunteered with a small department in Hamburg. Did that for a bunch. Found some really, really solid fire service mentors, which sometimes can be hard to come by nowadays. But I found myself some really good mentors who really guided me, gave me a lot of really good direction, provided some good framework for professional fire service delivery, thinking about the community, thinking about the people that need us, which was great. From there, I spent probably about six to 8 years in that department. And at that time, I was going to college, trying to figure out, what I'm going to do in life, where I'm going to go, and decided, hey, you know what, time to grow up and be a big boy, buy a house. So I bought a house a little bit farther south from the city of Buffalo, in the town of Evans. So I left my department, my volunteer department in the town of Hamburg, joined another volunteer department in the town of Evans. Was there for a bunch of years. Did some really good work with the guys out there. I was very fortunate because I found a really good line of guys that were just, it was no nonsense. We weren't worried about, chicken dinners and bingo points. We were worried about getting on the trucks and, and responding to calls and putting out fires and helping people, which was great. And it was a great thing to be a part of. It was a great thing to contribute. It empowered you in the fire service and felt great to be a part of that. So I was very fortunate for those first two companies to just have just awesome guys that just wanted to work. That was the end of it, period, end of statement. We weren't worried about the periphery, and we know in the fire service, there's sometimes a lot of nonsense. But we were able to kind of negate that and do what we needed to do to deliver a great service to the community. So I enjoyed that. Fast forward through my time down in the town of Evans and met my now wife. We decided, hey, you know what? We're going to get married, start a family. And we moved up to the town of Orchard Park, which is where we live now. It was interesting conversation when I basically told her, hey, I'm going to continue on with the fire service career and join a department here in Orchard Park. Have been there ever since. And again, found myself with just a great group of guys, same reasons, not worried about the nonsense on the periphery, but are here to do a job, deliver professional service to the community, work hard, take pride in what they do. And it's been great. It's actually kind of interesting, those, for somebody who's moved around the fire service and from different departments. Every department that I've been a part of has been pretty much a RIT company. So in the town of Hamburg, the company that I was a part of, a lot of our response, a lot of our mutual aid was RIT work. And then when I went to the town of Evans, it was the same thing. They were townwide RIT company. And I came to Orchard Park, and it was like, I can't shake this idea of being part of a company that doesn't, in some facet, doesn't do RIT work, which is, it's kind of neat, kind of interesting, but different too. So, but that's kind of a Cliff Notes version of my my fire service career.
Definitely.
So,
all right, so when you were growing up, you said you were growing up in Lackawanna.
Yep.
At what point did you join Hamburg? At 18? Or join the volunteer department in Hamburg?
So I had some tastes of the fire service as a junior, as an explorer. So, even before that, kind of being in a youth program around the firehouse, kind of getting the introduction of, hey, this is what the fire service is. This is what we're all about. This is what we do. Washing trucks and, doing what we could as juniors, but just kind of whetting that appetite a little bit. And then, right when I turned 18, it was, application was in, and, waiting that voting process. So,
okay. Yeah. How were the parents supportive of that, or did they want to see you branch off, do other things, sports?
Yeah. I was active in sports I was active in sports in high school. Never did any collegiate sports. It was just kind of one of those things where, you're going to college, get your education, figure out what you're going to do from there. I was actually pretty heavy into politics, believe it or not. I ran for city council in Lackawanna, lost miserably.
That's why you left? They booted you?
No, yeah.
Tuck your tail.
Yeah, get out of here. No, it was, that's what I thought I was going to do. I was in college. I was even part of the ROTC program.
Oh, nice.
Thought I was going to go into the military. Thought I was going to pursue a law degree. Be a lawyer, because my major was political science. So I'm like, yeah, this is going to be the path. Did some internships with some congressmen in the area, and I think after running for office and having that loss, it kind of gives you that reality check. Hey, is this what you want to do? Is this where you want to go?
Right.
So and it just by chance, one of the guys that I was working with, I did commercial EMS for a little bit as well, while I was going through college. And one of the guys I was working with said, hey, you know what? You may want to take this test. I said, test for what? He goes, for customs. Just take it. You never know. Just take it. All right, whatever. So I took it. And at that time there was a hiring freeze. So I'm waiting around. And then one day, just boom, get a call. Hey, by the way, you want Buffalo? Yeah. I'd love to work in Buffalo. I don't have to go to the southern border. Sure. Yeah. What do you got for me? Well, you got an academy, you got a start date in 2 months, and then you got the academy, a month and a half after that. All right, let's go. And that's kind of where it started. So
how long was that academy?
It's a 4-month academy in Glencoe, Georgia, about an hour north of Jacksonville, Florida.
And you were married at the time?
It was funny. So I was not married yet. Was I married? Now you're putting me on the spot. If my wife hears this podcast, she's not going to be happy.
We'll block her out.
Yeah, block her out. Yeah. Although all those dates match together. 15 is when we got married. So it was right around that time when I got married, when I made that trip out to the newlyweds, made that trip out to the academy. So, but 4-month academy. So,
man, that's a long time.
Yeah.
All right. So you said that was in like 2015?
Yeah, 20.
So I imagine
no, back up. Sorry. Academy was before I was married, because that was 2011. So when I came back from the academy 2012, I got married in 2015. So It's all coming back. The coffee's starting to kick in.
Still got to get mine.
It's all right.
All right. So I imagine in order to do all this, so between the fire service,
yep,
that kind of keeps you active, busy, out of trouble for the most part. We've seen a lot of firemen get in trouble, but for the most part, that keeps you out of trouble. You played sports, high school. How were grades? I mean, in order to do customs and everything, I can't imagine you're a solid D student the whole
Yeah,
way.
no. I think I finished college with like a 3.3
Okay.
GPA. So I did well. Wasn't rocking out a 4.0, wasn't going to be top of the class or anything like that, but I did good. Tried to keep it good. Make your parents proud, I mean,
Mhm.
I was brought up on that whole name recognition. It's not just you, you're carrying a family name with you, and if you're, you got to honor that family name. Do the best that you can. Yes, sir, no, sir. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. And good, religious background, upbringing, frame the morals and the principles, and you be a good person. That's the way it was.
Was that for the carrying the family name thing? Was that more something that your parents imposed, or was that the neighborhood you grew up on, or you grew up in the region? Was that common?
Um, I think it was a generational thing. I think it was one of those things where you grew up and it was kind of that unwritten rule. I don't think it was necessarily mentioned that that's what you did back then. It's a realization now of how you were taught by your parents, what your upbringing was, that, hey, this is what they were trying to do, raise you to be a good person. Now it's that realization. Hey, you know what? They raised me to be a good person, because now whenever I say my name or people recognize a name, they recognize the family. Hey, really great parents, really great family. Oh, I knew this person in your family. I knew this guy in your family, So, I think it was just the whole idea of just being a good, be a good person, at the end of the day. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
Explain it the right way.
absolutely. Yeah, a lot of commonality, and for some reason, those the types of people that end up moving up through the fire service and making a difference, whether that's at a local level or a regional level. And it seems like you got the both mixes plus the work, and you take an aggregate of everything that you have going on and kind of and pull from each version. So when you have your leadership at work, you bring that into the firehouse. With the stuff that you learn at the firehouse, you might bring a new idea to work, and then it bounces off. And then in the middle ground, you're also a fire instructor for the county
Right.
that you live in.
Yep.
So, and you're pulling from all three examples. And a lot of that comes back to how we were raised, whether that's a mentor that's, it was a neighbor, scout leader, something like that, or just solid parents.
Yep.
You see that something helped drive you. You have internal drive, but something helped mature you along the way, or helped like form you in the
Right.
direction that you're going. And I think that's really cool. This is what we like to discuss.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
now we got to take a look and see what is it that you've been working on.
Sure.
So you are assistant chief at Orchard Park Fire Company.
Correct.
All right. How long did it take to get to that position?
So coming into the department, I'm bringing kind of those years and experience with me, right? Bringing the experience and the knowledge from where I existed in the town of Hamburg, where I existed in the town of Evans. I move in and decide, hey, listen, I'm joining the fire department again. Cool. And I knew some of the guys that were already here just through interactions, mutual aid calls, and things like that. So it was pretty easy for me to kind of, walk into the firehouse and kind of understand what was going on. So I was on a probationary status, just like anybody else that walks through the door. And it was more of understanding, hey, listen, this is how we do stuff. This is our SOP. This is the way we run. This is how we operate. And again, in the fire service, you're going to have that, those commonalities across the board, and there may be some nuances, here and there with some operations, and it's, it was just learning the way that they do things, started off, and again, on that probationary status, got myself to a point where I was comfortable with the way that they operated. Took a year or two as just a regular guy, just, riding the rig, observing. Unfortunately with the fire service, volunteer service, and this idea of a struggle for manpower, right? Is the ask was there, hey, you're comfortable filling a lieutenant's spot, yeah, sure. Whatever you need, chief, I'm here for you, because ultimately that helps the operation, right? People that are willing to step up and lead, step up and help, step up and work hard. It makes a difference. And it's contributing in a positive manner to the mission. And what's the mission? Service to the community. So took that lieutenant spot, took over the FTO program, which was, I don't want to say a huge lift, but it was an interesting point to start this whole idea of teaching, right? Mentoring. I've had mentors, and I wanted to make sure that people that were walking through the door in our firehouse had somebody that they could go to, a positive influence in the fire service. So I picked up that FTO program, transitioned over to a captain a year later, and then it's just kind of like that boom, 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 that progression up the ladder, so to speak. All at the same time, not here for a white hat, not here for a cool car to drive around. It's the mission, it's the vision. Helping the community, being professional, delivering a service when people need help. That's what it's about.
So when you were going from a black hatter to a lieutenant,
yep.
When that position was offered to you, was there any hesitation to that? Did you feel 100% comfortable just diving into that, or was it?
There's always hesitation, right? I mean, there's always hesitation, and I mean, it's that balance, right? When you're responsible for people, there's always a hesitation. Even at my 9-to-5 job, I'm responsible for 30, 40 officers, on a shift, on a tour. There's always that hesitation. Hey, I'm responsible for these guys, and these gals. So yeah, there's always, riding the front seat, being responsible for people. And especially in the volunteer service, you don't know who's going to walk through that door when that alarm goes off. So now it's being comfortable with everyone in that department. That's a challenge. So yeah, there's a little bit of some hesitation to it, but it's understanding that challenge, and then drawing on my experience to make a positive outcome.
Okay. What did you do to prepare yourself for that role? By the time you realized, the biggest thing that hit me there was not knowing who's going to walk in the door to jump on the brake.
Yep.
So on the volunteer side, yeah, you don't know who's coming, or if anybody.
Sure.
Right. On the career side, sometimes we don't really see the schedule ahead of time, but you don't know if you got an overtime guy, a swap guy, or somebody bangs in sick. And
sure.
You're not going to know until the last minute who that other person's going to, fill that spot. Lou, correct me. I mean, do you see that similarity there? Does that ever drive you nuts or feel a little underprepared because you're not sure who the hell's coming up?
I just had a conversation with our assistant chief about this. I mean, yes and no. Like my group, when we had the retiree and we were filling my rig with overtime, it was consistently inconsistent. So I was always prepared for the inconsistency. I think it's the times where what throws me off, and it's my guys don't do it. They do it. They don't have to do it. They do it out of courtesy. But if they're blowing in sick or they're taking last minute vacation, they let me know just so I can mentally prepare for who's coming in or whatever. It's at times where it's a last minute call in and I walk into the firehouse. I'm like, oh, where's so-and-so? Oh, you didn't hear he blew in sick. I'm here today. And I'm like, oh, all right. So it's a quick adjustment. It can throw you off, but for the most part, I mean, just being an officer, that you gotta learn how to take those punches. I don't know if that really.
No, yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to see in comparison to what that is walking in the door, who you're going to get. But as you both went from black hatter up to the next level, what did you guys do? This is a question goes to both of you. What did you do to prepare yourselves for that role? Other than just mentally prepared, was there anything that you sought out, any training, anything in particular, any mentorship? Be like, hey, I took this thing, but I think this is going to be a little bit more scary than I thought. Was there ever that nature for either of you?
I think really it's training, right? Training's very important. You have to know what you're doing before you can lead those who are then going to do. If you don't have a knowledge of fireground operations, how are you supposed to lead somebody on the fireground? If you don't understand and know what needs to be done as an engine company, if you don't know what needs to be done as a truck company, And if you don't know, especially in the volunteer service, that if you don't have a ladder company coming, how to adjust on the fly to be able to perform those tasks on the fire ground, you may need some more time to develop as a leader. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it's, we'll get banged out for a fire and it's, you don't know who's coming. You don't know who's going to arrive on your second due catching your water supply. Your truck company may be 12 minutes away, before they arrive on scene. So in that leadership role, it's very much, you have to know an immense amount of information to be able to make those tactical and operational decisions.
Yeah, those are the 30,000 foot view
100%.
decisions that you might, in a lot of volunteer departments, you might have to make as a lieutenant, a newly minted lieutenant.
Correct.
If you're first arriving. Yeah.
What I think a lot of people don't understand, and to Paul's point, where he's saying it, but he's not really coming out and saying it strongly, and I'll say it for him, is being a officer in a volunteer fire department, you have to be the strongest leader that I can think of, because you don't know who's coming. You don't know when they're going to get there. You don't know your other mutual aid companies if they're coming or when they're coming. You're it. My job's easy. I know my schedule years in advance of who's working with me. Now, with the case of, sick times and stuff like that, but I know my personalities that I'm working with day in and day out. A volunteer officer, you don't know what they're coming from at home life that day. They might have just gotten an argument with their significant other. Something might have just happened. They might have just got laid off. You don't know what their home life has got. And now you have to manage and lead those people. I don't like saying manage, but you have to lead those people into a dynamic environment as a fire scene is. It is a tough job, and you have to be one of the strongest leaders out there. I commend a good volunteer officer that can do that job well. I wrote down here when Matt asked the question, what did you have to have as coming in as officer? And it just popped into my head. You have to have humble confidence. And it goes to what Paul said. You have to have confidence to make decisions on the fire ground in a timely manner, because indecision is the worst decision. And you have to be able to make those decisions in a quickly, timely, effective, efficient manner. And you got to make them right.
While you were talking, it popped in my head too. The other thing that you have to be able to do is say no. It's so easy. It is so easy just to say yes. So easy to say yes. Because when we say yes, we potentially avoid a conflict. And I'm not talking about like an argument, right? But a conflict, a conflict being something that you potentially going to have to resolve down the road. And that's normal firehouse banter back and forth. That's just, all the way up to fireground operations. It's very difficult to say no sometimes. And as a chief officer now, we took a working fire a couple days ago, and there were some things that I didn't like that my crew did. And I brought him back, and I'm like, I can do one of two things. I can fly off the handle and just completely go postal, which may get the point across, right? Or I can soften that blow a little bit. And it's always about a teaching moment, right? And I brought the folks in from the crew, and I said, hey, listen, let's just do a little wash on that fire. What'd you guys like? What happened? And when I say, what did you like? What happened? It forced them to tell me from their perspective, not my perspective, their perspective, what happened, what went right, what went wrong. Cool. I'm going to take that, put that away. I'm going to put that to the side. Okay. I'm not going to forget about it. I'm just going to put it to the side. And I'm going to say, listen, this is my feedback for you. This is from my perspective, what I thought. And we went through, all the way from when the alarm initially came in, all the way to, when we kind of divided crews and things like that. We were assigning tasks on the fire ground. And, both of them looked at me and goes, hey, I really appreciate that feedback. And it wasn't telling them they did something wrong. I'm just, hey, listen, think about this when you're operating on the fire ground. Think about this when you're on the way, when you're responding. Use these as takeaways. And I think if we frame that right as a leader, because again, it's very difficult to say no sometimes. And to say yes is always the easy way out. But we turn those into teaching moments and mentorship moments. I think that has a benefit to people. And as a leader, sometimes we think that saying no is going to cause a conflict, but really people need to hear no. It's almost like they're wanting to be told no, because that's a teachable moment for them in some respects, if I frame that correctly, if that sounds right to you.
No, I agree with it. Saying no is, we don't say no enough. But to go back to what I was finishing up on, the humble part, you got to have the confidence, but you have to be humble enough to know when you're wrong and admit you're wrong. And not only admit you're wrong to officers or chief officers higher than you, but also to the firemen. They might know more than you. There's firemen out there that have more experience than I'll ever have. There's chief officers that have more experience than I have. And I got to know, I got to know when I'm wrong, and I got to know when to admit I'm wrong. So if I make a decision, I can justify it. And then they might say, well, I would do this in this situation, and be like, you know what? You're right. Next time, that's what I'll do. And we've talked about this before on earlier podcasts. When I got promoted, I was kind of thrown to the wolves. I had my senior man had at the time 15 years on the job, and then my probie, and it was a dispatcher that got hired on, and we went to the academy together. And it wasn't the best of times for my senior man. He was going through some personal stuff, and I was the financial advisor. I was the priest. I was the marriage counselor. I was almost everything except for a fire officer, it seemed like, but that all got roped into the job, especially at the kitchen table every morning. They walked through that door and their whole world was dumped on me, and you have to take that all in and get them back in the mindset that, hey, we're here for, at the time, 10 hours, or we're here for 14-hour night shift, and we got a job to do. So let's get that all out. We got it all out. Okay, good. Now let's get the fire side done. Let's do what we're here to do.
Yeah, I agree. That humble confidence. You can tell, and you can pick up on that. If I've got newer officers, fire ground training, hey, I need you to do X, Y, and Z. This is your objective. And I get that. You can tell when you get that look in the face, that's just like, what? And then it's, kind of bringing them back into reality. You got that confidence, and that's through that experience, through doing. We're all doers, right? That's why we're here. We're all doers. Building on that experience and developing that I agree, Lou, 100%. That humble confidence, it's huge.
So did you have any kind of formal training for the fire service before taking that position, or was there a large gap before you took, like, say, instructor and officer one?
I guess trying to put the timeline together. I don't know if there was ever really any formal leadership training. You take your fire officer one. There's some good foundational concepts within those state classes that set you in the right direction, we'll say, right? But I'm a proponent of doing it. You have to, and I'm not necessarily saying, in the volunteer service and where we run, we're not running fires every week, so we rely on, like, our smells and bells calls, just our fire alarm activations, our training opportunities when we're going to the tower to do live fire. That's the opportunity for folks to be able to get into those roles and practice. I can't expect you to know exactly what to do when you're sitting in the front seat, and how to talk on a radio if you've never talked on a radio before. And my problem sometimes is I expect that to happen, and then I'm thinking to myself, what is going on here? Why can't they get this? Well, the reason why they can't get it is because they were never told from the beginning how to do it the right way, or they were told but it was something that was glazed over, and it was just kind of like, oh, all right, well, there you go. And we've never added that as something to train on repeatedly. Size up. If I've got really crappy size up for my first line officers, what are you guys doing? Then the realization is, well, they were never told how to do a proper size up, or they weren't instructed or guided or mentored on what we are looking for in terms of our SOPs and SOGs, on the important information that should be given during a size up. So that's an example of, don't make those assumptions. People need, and especially now I've done a lot of work recently, even kind of teaching from the state and taking some train the trainers, understanding the generational gaps and how, we have different learners. We have adult learners and all these generations, X, Y, Z, whatever we're at now. I don't even know how they're classified anymore because there's so many. But, a lot of people are looking for that why. Yeah, they need to be told. They need to be given the example, and it's not like they're trying to be disrespectful by saying why. It's just they crave that knowledge, right? They crave more. And as sometimes it's tough because, as Lou alluded to with that, humble confidence, you got to admit, hey, listen, man, I don't know, I'm not going to pretend to know everything about the tech rescue stuff. I am not, a not weenie, but hey, you know what? We'll work with it together. I'll work with it with you. We'll find a solution. We can't tie, a clove hitch. You know what? Let's do it together. We can both learn on this end, so it's kind of dispelling those assumptions and just, being a leader, right?
Yeah. So Lou, when you first got promoted, was there a long gap before you had to go to flips?
I was promoted in February of 14, and I was in flips mid-April. I think that reported the last week of April.
Okay. So after you received flips and came back, did you feel that you were more prepared for anything that might have transpired in that gap leading up to it?
No, I mean, because the way flips is in New York State, it's a good program. I'm not knocking it. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff that comes out of it, but it's kind of a check the box. It's the way the law is written for fire service in New York State is that a civil service officer has to have this class, this class, this class. Oh, and by the way, you have to get first line supervisor training, and it can only be taught at the FDNY, which it is what it is. But a lot of those classes are offered in outreach or at the New York State Fire Academy. So I think I had, out of the required classes that I needed to have to be a fire officer 1, I think I had all but one. And the one was like the building construction class, which was outdated at the time anyways. But there's parts of that flips program that they give you at the FDNY that you're not going to get anywhere else, like the 8-hour TIC class. And they've updated more, from what I understand, since I've been there. They've updated the flips program for outside FDNY guys to give them more than just fire instructor 1, fire officer 1, and whatever the other requirements are. Because a lot of guys are coming in with those, so they want if they're going down in the FDNY for this 4 weeks, and they already have these classes, it's like, why do we even need to go? So they're giving them other stuff, like the mental performance is big now down there that they're giving them. The TIC is still there. They're doing some more hands-on stuff. So it's gotten better for non-FDNY officers that are going there. But I always said, you make flips, you go down there with an open mind, and you go down there and want to learn something, you're going to learn something. It's the guys that go down there that think it's BS that they have to go down there for 4 weeks when they already have the majority of the classes. Those are the guys that get nothing out of it. But did it prepare me for the better from what I had? I joke because one of our battalion chiefs kind of had the same mindset. The only thing it gave me was I took the wrong test. the way they operate down there, it's amazing. And they're the big dogs. They set the standard. After the post that just went out over the
I knew you were gonna say
Instagram,
that.
there's no hard. I have nothing but respect for anybody that works in that department. They are what they are. They are the standard for the fire department, no matter what anybody says. We just had Dave on from Detroit. I mean, you could make an argument that Detroit years ago and still is the standard for the size of the department going on. He's saying what they average 7 to 9 fires a night.
A night.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know of a department around here that's doing that type of duty, and I don't even. You can make an argument that their run numbers in Detroit per capita, their fire numbers per capita, percentage wise, are probably either the same, if not more, than the FDNY. I mean, I'm not going to dig into the numbers. I really don't care that much. But yeah, what I got out of that is that I did have an application in to take the test for the FDNY, and they I don't know if they still do it, but they send a postcard. This was like 2005. They would send a postcard in the mail, and that postcard was your admission ticket to get into the exam. And my postcard arrived 2 days after the exam was given. So I never ended up taking the test that I wanted to take the test. But I'm glad I'm happy where I am now. But taken away at an officer level, it was more of an experience just being down at the Rock, or down at Fort Totten, and going to the Rock a couple times, and just interacting with the guys from the FDNY, with the officers there, and picking their brains on other stuff, not so much fire officer stuff, is what I got most out of it. I think I've gotten more out of the past. I think I probably got more out of being an officership, if you want to call it that, working in staff as the training officer, than I have as in the fireground.
So as the MTO.
Yeah. Because
So,
I not as a humble brag, but I felt I was always good in the firehouse as an officer in dealing with issues and conflict, but paperwork and administrative stuff was never my strong point. And that being in the training office as the MTO, you are forced to be good at administrative stuff and time management and everything else. And the 2 years that I spent as a training officer, it kind of honed my craft in the administrative side of being an officer.
yeah, I know. We look at your desk now and it's much tidier.
Well, it's because
Definitely learned how to do that.
It's only tidy because we rearranged it, and I've never had a chance to untidy it.
Organize it. So for us, the MTO and the HSO at our department, when we if you're promoted up to that position or move from the line into that position, if you're already promoted, it's an office position for the most part. I mean, you're not only stuffed in the office, but you're not getting on the rig in the morning. You have that. You do have a vehicle that goes with that. So if you're the MTO, there's an outfitted. It's a truck. It's like a 2,500 truck, and there is a bunch of training gear on there. And you're going out monitoring everybody's training. You're developing training plans, instructional stuff, you name it. But it's, for the most part, you got a desk, and that's your space to own instead of a whole full-fledged firehouse or fire rig.
Sure.
So that's what he's getting at.
And back then, when the position was new, because the position used to be the assistant fire chief was the MTO, and then when they dropped it down to a lieutenant and they gave us a vehicle, I live practically in the district at 1 mile outside the line, and I was going on any call I wanted. And before the union, and we're getting into union stuff, but before that contract, the next contract, I was also able to work line overtime anytime I wanted. So I still got to practice my craft of being a fire officer on a fire truck, and then Monday through Friday in the office, hone my craft in the administrative side and conduct all the drills. I made sure as the MTO, I believed that if I was a training officer, I'm going to be the training officer. So I'm going to be out there conducting drills to make sure we're holding the standards that we wanted to hold for the district, and going to other departments to see how they operated, and building relationships with the other department. It was the experience I gained in the office in those 2 years was invaluable.
So it sounds like from the both of you, the administration work, paperwork, whatever, you got to file something. That's what the formalized training is really gifting you. But as far as working with the men and women, going on jobs and making those decisions on the fire ground, that's all just reps, experience.
Yeah.
Right. Correct. Is that anything else to add to that, or am I way off?
It's reps and experience. It's from training. You can read books on to help you make decisions, but you got to practice it. You can't just read a book and you're inoculated into how to make decisions. You have to go out and practice. And the only way to practice is through, and if you're not busy, you got to go out and train. And hopefully the training scenarios are set up to where it allows the company officers to make decisions. We're not training inside of a box.
Right.
I think hopefully that answered that.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else you want to?
Yeah, no, I think the other part of that too is as best as you can observing or existing when leadership fails too. And not being afraid to make those mistakes. Indecision is a decision, sometimes we may not make the right decision, but learning from that's where you learn, right? It's the mistake. We make the right decisions all the time. I mean, we're never going to do that, right? But where's that learning process,
Right.
So I think part of that is not making a decision or learning from people that have made the wrong decision. Hey, listen, I was on this job once. We did this. That was definitely a no-go situation, but learn from it type thing.
Yeah, that goes back to that. I keep saying it. I've said it on a couple of these podcasts now, and it's that if you can't be a perfect example, you can be a horrible warning. It's usually one or the other, and both of those are learning opportunities, either for yourself or for others.
Yeah, it's I heard a former Buffalo Fire Commissioner once say, "You can't let good luck reinforce bad decisions."
Oh, that's good. That's a T-shirt right there.
There's a T-shirt. But I think, especially in the volunteer service, based on sometimes maybe a lack of experience, lack of training, a fear of making the wrong decision, that we allow good luck to reinforce bad decisions. So
there's also
takeaway.
I was gonna say that's a fireman's way of putting the standard definition, which would be the normalization of deviance. You do something wrong over and over again, you get away with it, and then there's that one time when you do it wrong, and then a catastrophe happens. You're like, well, I've done it this way my whole career. Well, it was the wrong way the whole career. And I just sent this video out to Bobby. We were talking about some stuff, and I said, you ever see this video? And it's the NASA engineer talking about the Challenger spaceship with the O-rings. Yep. And they got away with the O-rings for so long, and they said, yep, it's fine. It's worked before. Well, they knew the O-rings were bad, and then when Challenger went up, what happened? It exploded, and it was a national tragedy. And that is the normalization of deviance. You can look it up. I was going to post it on our Instagram. I was going to give it some cool down period of what we just posted, but he actually did the talk for the International Association of Firemen. It's Mike Mullane, the normalization of deviance speech. It's a 2-part video that you can look up on YouTube. We'll probably post it up on Instagram.
I got it in my work email. I'll forward it to you, Paul.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's like a TED talk, but it's for they gave it the international convention years ago.
Yeah, that's a good one. All right, so with all this learning to be a leader through experience, formalized training, then we get into training, developing training programs, at some point you decided let's take this show on the road. Let's go outside let's branch from just our department or just our station. Let's go bigger. Let's go county. What was the impetus there? How did you develop that idea and then run with it to become a county instructor?
It's a good question. I don't think I've ever been asked that before. Maybe in the interview. Why do you want to be a county fire instructor?
All right, start there. What'd you answer? I don't.
I don't remember. Skip, pass. No. Honestly, I think it gets back to that whole idea of that mentorship, right? But I've also existed in some pretty poor training programs. Where one of my big things in developing a training program, whether it's on the department level, facilitating training at the county level, it's this idea of time. Everybody's time is valuable. And when you're looking at a training program and delivering a training program or delivering a drill, or, whether that's a quick 2-hour thing on a Monday night or, a 4 or 5 hour block on a Saturday morning, I want to make sure people feel that their time is valued and that they're getting the most out of training by having it be a dynamic training. Because once you enter that training realm and people are like, this is a waste of my time, you're done. You are done. I don't care what anybody says. You're done. And now you have to work twice as hard to bring them back. So you lose them from the get-go. Now it's an uphill battle. And not only an uphill battle for that training, but also now for future trainings. So it's a heavy lift. In my humble opinion, it's a heavy lift. So when you are the person that's delivering those trainings, it's coming up with that training plan, you have to make sure that it is on point, ready to go. Because especially in the volunteer service, once people feel that their time is being wasted, or it's not time well spent, you're done. And it's very difficult to be able to bring those people back to the table and say, we're going to try this again. So I think in terms of being that county instructor is I've existed in those bad trainings. I've existed in poor plan trainings, guys showing up at the firehouse on a Monday night when the training's supposed to start at, 1900 and they're jaw jacking at 1845 going, hey, what are we doing tonight? And you hear those conversations and you're like, wait a second, there's no plan here. And then you just roll your eyes and you're like, all right, well, my time's going to be wasted tonight. I'm not really going to get anything out of this. And now you're, as the person that's either developing or delivering that or facilitating it, you're behind the 8 ball. And it's a bad place to be.
There was, Louis, actually one that you told me to listen to, Sean Ryan's show. One of the dudes on there that taught and trained at for a while, they got to the point, and I've started seeing this over the last, we've been running the fire academy in Monroe County for how many years now?
Since 2020.
So it's like 9 classes. I can't remember how many, some of them were twice a year. But you start getting to the point that, going back to your other recognition, that each generation has a new learning style. It's not that each generation itself as a whole has one learning style. Every year over year, they each individually inside of that generation have learning styles.
Sure.
So you have to be, you got to be on your toes, constantly recognizes these changes and adapt to them. And Lou and I have talked about this before, that it's getting to the point where you notice when somebody's going to do something. So let's say it's a fireground operation. You can see the panic in their eyes. They make a certain twitch, or a finger does something different. And they're about to react a specific way, where you can dial up that training or dial down that training to get your point across, or to let a very specific thing sink into them. And
Absolutely.
If you're underprepared for that, delivering that message, whether that's through, let's say, like a PowerPoint, which I just really recently heard that they now got to call them slide decks, not PowerPoints. Wasn't that you telling me? I can't remember who was just telling me that. Like the modern day term is slide deck, which is ridiculous.
My kids, it's CapCut or some other program they use. I don't know.
I still use power.
Yeah.
I think it was Sean Egan saying that, actually, now that I think about that, which we all work with Sean.
Right.
But whether it's a PowerPoint or it's an actual hands-on training scenario, a CAN confidence course always comes to mind because it's limited in its approach. There's not a lot you can do. You can't set up a great realm given all the rules, right? Of course, and still produce something great. So you have to bend them a little bit in order to produce the reaction for their light bulb to go off. And each individual learner has a different freaking shade of light bulb. So it's much harder. I can't create one scenario that I can run all 25 or 30 participants in and get that same light bulb reaction. I have to change up that environment just ever so slightly for each individual so that the message I'm trying to deliver to them, that install that new programming, that software, whatever you want to use as a metaphor, actually hits and sinks.
Yeah.
Not being prepared, what are you doing? Are you wasting time? I don't think so, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny because going back to ladders, right? We were going to do a station. I think that you were involved in one of our department trainings for doing ground ladders, and you're like, "Oh, let's do the Paxton drill." I'm like,
song comes up a lot. Yeah.
I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And this is the loose point about the whole idea of existing in that MTO and not only doing the stuff for your individual department, but also seeing what mutual aid, what they're doing, how they're existing, what is going to be new and fresh and what are they bringing to the table. And that's super important, right? Is, hey, I can run a ladder drill. Cool. But how do I make this appealing, right? How do I take this outside the box and really have that light bulb go on? Because you can see that as well. Like, guys will show up at the firehouse. Hey, we're throwing ladders today. Okay, cool. And then you present it in a way that just all of a sudden there's aha moments across the board, and I think that Paxton drill was one thing, even as an instructor for me, like, cool. Yeah. We'll bang ladders all day, but
I learned it from the guys out where I work.
Yeah. Like, that's just like it's a whole, and then I started putting that in my toolbox. So when I get guys that come out to the tower and we're running live fire, guess what? We got 8 guys that are standing around as, scene support, exterior, whatever you want to call them. Hey, you guys can bang exterior ladders, right? All right, cool. Where's your tower? Cool. All right, let's hit some ground ladders real quick. And then you frame that in that Paxton drill, and it's like, it blows their mind sometimes. They're like, dude, and they're gassed by the end of that training, and this is just exterior, exterior ladders.
It only works one time, because once you know the trick of it,
exactly.
If you and again, that's the same thing. I've seen that. We've seen that for example, at our fire academy, somebody else might get assigned, okay, so-and-so is going to do it instead of Matt. And I try to, hey, make sure you set it up like this. And I watch from a distance, and not every time it hits the same way, it just ends up becoming a ladder throwing drill. But it's the decision-making process.
Absolutely.
Where you frame it a certain way so that under stress, they have to make a decision. And what you just said before, indecision is a decision.
Yep.
Right? Be confident in your decision and go with it, and then work it out on the fly. That's the whole point of that drill. It's not designed that everybody wins. Most people, quote unquote, fail the drill.
Right.
And I don't want to give away everything. So either you can Google it or go participate in one. But once they see it and the light bulb goes off, then they remember it. It's about the decision making. It's not about the ladders. But in the process of it, you're also banging ladders,
right? And it's
making tough choices.
And that gets back to that your previous podcast. We talked about it before, that RECEO VS, and I think Lou had the conversation about the tower ladder on the story and a half ranch, and and like that was listening to that, and I'm like, yeah, these guys, in my area, they want to show up on the truck, let's do truck work. Yeah, let's go. All right, I need you to bang some ground ladders, man. They're like, dude, that's your job, your truck company. Like, Yeah. So being able to develop those dynamic trainings, like that's a key. And again, it goes back to that whole time thing, invested, making sure that they feel that their time is worth something, and then again, the opposite happens, right? So they don't feel that their time is wasted. You're working hard to bring them, or they feel that their time is wasted. You're working hard to bring them back. Dude, if you give them just a home run in training, like now the hooks are in. Now they're like, all right, yeah, I want to go back. I want to do more. When are we doing this again? Or what else do you have for me? You know what I mean? that's a cool thing to have too.
Yeah, when you can grab a program, if you're developing something for the first time and seeing it, or you're seeing some success as an instructor and capturing, I just wrote it down, capturing the audience's attention, where the point where they see your name on the schedule, oh, I want that guy.
Yeah,
I'm going to take only classes by him. Well, now you're kind of drawing from the other instructors. So now you have a secondary purpose as an instructor to make sure that you mix in with your other instructors as well, so that one, you can learn from them, but maybe they can pick up how to re-engage their audience as well.
Right.
Now you have the fluctuation across the, peer to peer across the table, while also across the next table over, which is the audience.
Right.
Now we start balancing out.
And we have that at the county level. We have guys that are just, they hit home runs every time they walk on the training ground. And one, from a county instructor, when I know who I'm working with that night, when I get that roster and I know that I'm with a bunch of home run hitters, like I'm juiced up. I'm ready to go. I'm like, this is going to be a great training night. Like let's set some fire and let's have some fun.
To the point where you wish you were the participant.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, there's been times where I've gotten feedback and have listened to some of these guys talk, and like I find myself taking a knee with the guys that are there for the training. You know what I mean? And I'm like, this is really cool. Because that's a part of it too. Like we're facilitating that training, but we're also in that learning process as well. We're existing in that learning process as well, which is super important. But, and that's the flip side, right? Like if I got my roster and they're, may not be as, strong, it's good to know, because then, hey, I might have to step up my game a little bit. I might have to bring, instead of 100%, I might have to bring 110%, knowing what I'm coming into. And I think departments know that too. Like when they're coming out, and they know that they're getting, hey, this is going to be a good training night. They're super juiced and they're into it and they're invested, and should they be all the time? Yeah, they should be. But that helps, right? That guy that's standing, or that gal that's standing at the front, leading that, facilitating that, that definitely helps.
Yeah, it kind of comes up. One thing that comes to mind is we've been trying to culture into our training at our county level. And Lou, what was it, maybe 2 years ago? I remember saying it for the first time out loud at work, saying, man, they really don't have, there's not a lot of search culture going on. Search culture, it's subculture really. But when people come out and they want to just push hand lines, just flow water and everything, it's like, well, let's get a rep in of searching. Well, how do we search? What is a primary search? What is a secondary search? Okay, we don't even have those levels. We just have a search night, or we have a truck night, we have an engine night, but even furthermore, it's just a handline night. It's just a large caliber handline night. So we started, let's pump in while that one crew is standing off to the side for a second, while one crew is actually in the evolution. Let's give them a task. Let's start doing a search. It's evident this season, because we call it fire season as it shifts from snow to mud.
Yep.
Right. Everybody that's coming out, they're automatically going into a search. That was 2 years ago that we started discussing, we got to implement this more, start pushing for that direction. That's a large culture, literally culture, where we're trying to grow something slowly. And as instructors, I think everybody kind of talked about it, hinted about it, slowly started injecting it into their training, to the point where now these companies are coming out for drill night. They want to just do first floor fire, second floor fire, and they automatically got a crew going to the second floor, going to the first floor, doing searches, primary searches, secondary searches, and going. It's like, this has been so exciting to see,
right?
Because this is going to be helpful to the end user, which is the community.
Sure.
They don't know what to expect. They just expected, their house gets put out and hopefully they have something to go back into.
Right.
This has a direct effect on that. And we've been using this very, very small injections over 2 years. And man, if we didn't come together on that, I don't think you'd be seeing that this year.
Sure.
Maybe next year, but
yep,
this is awesome. Yeah. So already there's been a developing culture. It's awesome. Anything else to add to that for both of you?
He was talking about like good instructors and stuff like that, and I wrote it down. It's funny because you take the fire service holistically, nothing's changed. I mean, turnout gear's changed, hose technology has changed. Nozzles really haven't changed. They just market them differently. There's some new science out there, but water is still being put on fires. Holes are still being cut in roofs. Searches are still being conducted. And it takes a good instructor to take the same lessons that are being taught for the past 50, 100 years, not to put a new spin on them to make them their lesson, but to get the students engaged enough to realize that if an instructor should be able to take that content that's been taught for 100 years and make it interesting and connect to the students to make them want to engage and then come back for that same instructor. And that takes a good instructor. The instructor that said, it's like, yeah, throw the ladder, this is how we do it, this all BS. And he sit there with a clipboard or whatever, just to mark the check boxes off for their JPRs. That's the one that's like, I don't want to go to this class anymore. But it's the instructor that engages with the students. That's how you become a good instructor.
Yeah.
I don't know if I was off on that one, but
no, that's absolutely it. So with that, Paul, you've been a victim of your own success. You've developed a whole new niche for yourself.
Yeah.
You want to explain that a little bit? Give us a little detail.
Sure. So I'm trying to be cognizant of timeline. So this was probably around right during COVID, or just going into COVID. The fire chiefs from the county kind of started asking some questions. And those questions kind of centered on the, I guess at that time, we'll term it the emerging technology of the dangers of lithium ion batteries in electric vehicles. And they approached at the county level and said, hey, what's out there? What can we as departments look to for some sort of training to kind of prepare our guys for, what we're seeing. And there wasn't really anything out there. There was some awareness. And I don't want to downplay what existed between, what UL and the Fire Science Research Institute, FSRI, had, what NFPA was putting out. I'm sure that there were probably some nonprofit, private organizations that were doing some things in terms of training. There was maybe a little bit coming out of the auto industry with regards to responder safety and things like that. But this even predates New York State's OFPC class on lithium ion batteries. So I was approached by the fire coordinator for the county that said, hey, listen, we've got this need. What do you think about kind of spearheading a program for the county? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know how much time this is going to take, because again, at this point, I'm already a county fire instructor. I think at that time, probably a captain with the department, almost transitioning into that chief officer role, family at home. And I'm like, what is this going to look like? So there's a lot of unknowns with it. Right. So I said, you know what, let me see what I can do. Let me just start doing my research and getting out there and see what this is going to look like. And he's like, all right, have at it. And I pretty much had free reign to do what I needed to do. So I started taking all the online classes that were already out there, started engaging UL and the Fire Science Research Institute and FDNY, who at that time had a really good, I don't want to say there was like a formal training that came out of FDNY. But because they were seeing so many issues, especially with e-mobility devices, because they were seeing so many issues with the lithium ion batteries, that they kind of, Lou talking about them being kind of the standard, they really took a huge point in terms of, the tip of the spear with trying to figure out how we're going to combat these fires that were involving lithium ion batteries. So I went to a bunch of different seminars and heard some folks talk, and I'm like, all right, let's start putting kind of pen to paper and developing a training program, very much on like an awareness level, to give guys in the county the ability to understand what they are, what these batteries are, foundational, how they're constructed, what they're all about, what goes wrong, why they go wrong, as members of the fire department, how we are going to mitigate those hazards, what we can and we can't do. Talking a little bit about, some post-incident, stabilization. When everything is good to go, the fire's out, so to speak, now what? And then talking about some additional training. It's kind kind of how I framed that whole program, so to speak. And it's been changing. Initially what had come out 4 or 5 years ago in a seminar series that we run at the county, a countywide training series over the winter, has very much changed and evolved into kind of adapting to the technology, right? So it started off as just pen and paper. Hey, these are some ideas. These are some organizations that exist to get some information from, and then basically taking a little bit from everywhere and putting it into a program that we could, deliver at the county level, saying, hey, this is what you need to be aware of. This is how things go wrong. This is how we're going to protect ourselves when they go wrong. This is how to mitigate things when they go wrong. And after things are done going wrong, this is how we're going to clean up and be able to get home safely. So that's kind of how that spun up.
Are you seeing in our region, so let's say Western New York in general, are you seeing more EV fires, vehicles by EV?
I think we're seeing it now because it's so yes and no. I think we're seeing it because we're more aware. So before, maybe we weren't as aware, and one of the things I talk about in the program is the idea of hybrids, right? And one of the comments I make is, when I say hybrid, I think in the fire service we do hybrids pretty well because we've been dealing with hybrids for a pretty long time, considering. I ask people when I say hybrid, what comes to mind, and everybody raises a Toyota Prius, right? So like we know that, but when it comes to the all electric stuff, people are unaware. And it's been out there for a while, but we're not there in terms of, attention to it. We're not there in terms of maybe something happening. Unfortunately, if something were to happen, people get hurt, and that raises the red flag where people are like, oh man, now I got to think about this now. Maybe it's not happening in their neck of the woods where, they still think that this is in some, far, far galaxy, far, far away type thing. But things are existing. And I think people are just starting to become now more cognizant of it. So I don't think I've necessarily seen an uptick in EV fires as opposed to internal combustion engine fires. I think people are just they're more aware of it now. And one of the things that I talk about in my training is Gordon Graham. And this whole idea of, risk assessment, risk modeling and things. And while the electric vehicles are to a certain degree safe, and I tell people, listen, I'm not in this training program. I'm not trying to tell you that every Tesla that rolls down the road is going to blow up. But the point that I'm trying to get across as I use Gordon Graham is that when things go wrong, they are going to be, low frequency, but high risk events. And that's something that we have to be prepared for. So that's kind of where that whole awareness level training kind of pushes to is, high risk, low frequency. That's what you got to be aware of.
What's making it high risk?
So there are several components, in kind of what I've done through my research and, looking at a lot of departments that have faced these is, number one, it's the unpredictability. It's the not knowing when you're going to have a battery go into thermal runaway. It's not like we can have a warning system in a vehicle or something on a battery pack that tells us, hey, guess what? I'm going to go into thermal runaway now, so be prepared. It doesn't exist. So, and I think to Lou's point about, the fire service hasn't changed in terms of putting water on the fire, cutting holes in the roof, doing searches. This changes the dynamic because, we're going to put water on this fire. This fire is not going to go out. So we're spending more time. It's becoming more manpower intensive. It's becoming more resource intensive, and people really don't have that realization yet. So it's that awareness. And it wasn't until very recently when OFPC came out with their state class. So that's something that the state had recognized that they needed to address. And again, I'm not part of the, I'll just call it the bureaucracy of how that came to be, or what the need was on the state level for that particular training. But there was a lot of question marks. We expect the fire to go out when we put water on it. And when that doesn't happen, hey, now what do we do? The idea that almost every EV fire that we go to now may potentially be considered hazmat. That doesn't happen during our normal internal combustion engine vehicle fires. Now we're kind of flipping that a little bit, where we're talking about hydrogen fluoride, hydrogen cyanide, CO, hydrogen gas, and then the water runoff from all that and what that looks like, what that creates for us. So I think that's why, to answer your question, that's why it's becoming, is just there's a lot more to it than just a engine compartment fire where we show up with our A-team, we dump 500 gallons of water, give or take, we roll some hose, we go home. There's a lot that's being that goes into this now. It's very different.
Now, transpose that to the other lithium battery options out there. So we're talking cell phones, scooters, the e-mobility bikes, and everything like that. I think that's definitely more prevalent.
Sure.
Is there anything that in your research is causing more of that? Is it just because there's more of those things out there in the market that people are buying versus, EV cars?
Yeah. So I think it's the society, it's the technology, right? Everyone wants it now. We want it now, and we want it for as cheap as we can get it. At the end of the day, that's what's driving it, right? I use this particular example. When I'm kind of teaching the program is, do you necessarily buy the charger for your cell phone from the manufacturer that you bought the cell phone from? And most people are like, no. And I'm like, well, why? Well, it's because it costs $40. They're charging me $40 for a charger that's hanging on the wall when I go to the Verizon or AT&T or T-Mobile store. And I'm like, all right, well, where are you getting your charger from? Amazon, right? We want it now. We want it cheaper. Mm-hmm. So what do we do? Type in USB phone charger. Boom. I can get a 30-foot phone charger, for my bedroom, but it's not just the bedroom. Now I need one for, the home office. I need one for the kitchen. I need one for the garage. And what do? We go to Amazon, we flick through, and we can find, here's a 10-packet phone chargers for, $4.99. Yeah. And guess what? It's Prime. Dump it in the basket and it's here in 2 days. And it's, again, I use that as a very dumbed down example, but we're talking about, the overcharging or using non-OEM products for lithium ion battery things that we're utilizing, whether that's power tools, whether that's a vehicle, whether that's a hoverboard, an e-mobility device. There's a lot to that, and by us not using proper charging, the overcharging or the undercharging, it creates, an issue with these batteries. That leads to thermal runaway. And that's when people pick up the phone and call us, and they expect that solution to the problem.
Yeah. Lou, we were just talking about the phone chargers. So you had a recent experience with buying a new phone and needing the charge cable.
So the new phone bought from one of the major cell service people. So I got an iPhone. And when you buy an iPhone now, you don't get a charging block. You only get the cord. So you got to buy a off-brand charging block from the store. And it's not, now the battery technology is better now. Matt and I were talking about this, but it's not the old school 5 amp hour charging blocks. It's I think the one I got, I don't, my bag's in my Jeep. But I think, what was it, 20 on there, Matt, that we looked at?
Yeah, they're usually like 20s.
Yeah. But the one thing, so we took that class in Buffalo, was it last week?
It was on, yeah. I know what you're talking about. How was it? I tried to go, but I couldn't make it because of my work schedule. So
it was good. It was good. So the two, they had the hazmat lieutenant from the FDNY and a retired
fire marshal
supervisor from the FDNY. And I saw them both at the FDNY symposium 2 years ago. It was the same lecture with some updated stuff in it, but it's always good to go to a same lecture because it reminds you of the stuff that you might have forgotten. But one thing when you're talking about with EVs, and we're not seeing EV fires as prevalent as the e-mobility stuff. And I'm thinking it's because the e-mobility batteries are easier to find on the market that are not manufactured battery packs. Like you can go to Amazon and buy a battery pack for an e-bike that's not meant for that e-bike, but you can't go on Amazon and buy a battery pack for a Tesla or
Right.
a Rivian car.
Absolutely.
So you're stuck with that manufacturer battery, which is safer than buying a battery off of Temu or these other sites that you can buy batteries from.
Absolutely. And you're getting, I think e-mobility is, and this is, I think, to the point of why New York is having so many issues with that, right? I mean, they can't build out, so they have to build up, right? And people are foregoing mass transit because e-mobility is so readily available. They can hop on a scooter or an e-bike and get from point A to point B. And half the time it would take them to take mass transit, right? Jump on a bus, jump on a subway, they can get where they need to go. And yeah, it's a prevalency thing, it's very much.
Yeah, and I wonder how much that's going to uptick now that they got like they have the service charges for, what do they call that? The crowding.
Yeah.
What is that? That tax or
tax? Yeah,
whatever
fee, whatever you want to call it. But here's the other thing too, is that there's a lot on, and again, YouTube, good thing, bad thing, right? But I mentioned that there's a lot of folks that are out there that can teach you, not necessarily the best thing, but to DIY yourself, a better battery pack. Hey, this is what's supposed to go on the bike. But if you take two and splice them together and do this little fix that I'm going to show you on my YouTube channel, now you can go twice as long, 3 times as long. And is that really the recommended practice? No. So that exists out there too, which that whole DIY factor, contributes to, this is not what the intended use of these batteries are for. But again, what are we looking to do? Get things cheaper, faster, and that contributes to doing things incorrectly, leading to thermal runaway and then, causing problems.
Right. And with cheaper, faster, I was just doing research for our department because we're replacing a corded Sawzall with the flex volt DeWalt line and pricing out batteries. And where do you go to? You go to Amazon and I type in DeWalt flex volt battery. And you know what comes up before any other DeWalt battery are knockoffs.
Yep.
They're knockoffs. And it's compatible with all this other stuff, but it looks cheap. It looks built cheap. And from the little knowledge I know is that these knockoff batteries is where the thermal runaway starts. It's because of the overheating, because the tabs are not welded. They're pressed. And that's where they fail. They short there. Correct me if that's the little knowledge I know about why some of these batteries fail.
Yeah. So you're looking at really, and this comes kind of from FSRI and their research that they've done. You're really going to have 5 ways that these batteries are failing. One being aging. Batteries just eventually get old. And what they've seen in their research, that the thermal runaway is really caused by the degrading of the separator between the cathode and the anode of the battery. And I don't want to get into a scientific discussion because I'm not a scientist. I'm not an engineer. And
that was my I don't know if you want to see this page I got going here.
Oh, there we go. Some notes. I love that. There's a lot of like equations on there and some fractions, I think. I don't know, some numbers. This is where we close it. No. But you get aging, you get some environmental factors between, excessive heat, excessive cold, road salt, things like that. You get and I think what you're alluding to is a manufacturing failure. And the running joke is a battery that's built at, 3 o'clock on a Friday, the same quality as a battery that's built at 8 o'clock on a Monday morning. There's that human element that goes into it too, and it's part of it. There is, a mechanical failure, where these battery packs are consistently being jostled, whether that's a collision, a high-speed collision where you get an electric vehicle that's involved in an auto accident, or if it's just, these e-mobility devices that are being run, across potholes and up and down curbs and things like that. Like that small trauma on that battery pack, could potentially over time lead to a degradation and cause that to go into thermal runaway. So, there's a bunch of different factors of how and why these things go into thermal runaway. But yeah, the cheaper in these Amazon knockoffs are, it's that it's that manufacturing. They're not built to the standard, and it's whatever's cheap, materials, process, things like that to get them out the door.
I mean, after taking that initial, I shouldn't say, yeah, because I took another battery class the following winter. But after that initial class at the symposium, I kind of rethought. You watch the electricians, and I'm sure we've all done it. You're putting, I say electricians because they're using screw guns to put stuff in, but you're hanging a picture on the wall. You drill the hole you drill your drywall, and then you got to put the drywall anchor in there. And you look around, you don't have a hammer. What do? You take the battery end of that screw gun and you pound the anchor in to the wall. And that trauma that you're putting on that battery could cause a failure next time you're charging it.
Yeah. And we had a fire in the northern end of the county. A lady was using they're out there. I don't know how effective they are, but it was one of those little push shovels that's got the broom on it that just, that brushes off the snow. She was just clearing the deck for her dog to go outside in the wintertime. She used that thing to clear off the deck so that, little Pooch's got a chance to go out and do the business, set it along the side of her siding. Battery goes into thermal runaway, chases up the side, gets into the soffits, and, got put out as a working house fire. All because of an electric shovel, that just got set on the side of the house, and again, we don't know when it's going to happen. It's not like there's an alarm goes off, we don't get any audible or beeping that says, hey, this battery's bad, it's going to go into thermal runaway. It happens,
That's the other concerning thing. And Matt and I were talking to a gentleman at that training in Buffalo, that smoke detectors do not detect the failure gases of these batteries. And there's that video that came out of Utah that was caused by the lithium ion battery, and you're hearing the smoke detector go off, but that's after that battery's been in runaway and that room is already flashed over.
Yeah, well involved.
If this company in Greenville, South Carolina, is coming up with a detector, and I think they're going to concentrate on detecting VOCs because he says it's the easiest to detect, and that would be early warning to at least get people out of their house while the battery is emitting the failure gases. The homeowner's not going to stop the thermal runaway, but at least they can get out. And
it's still only seconds, not minutes, not a half an hour. It's
Correct.
Seconds.
Correct.
And that's the wild part about all these things. So looking for the public and what you can, how to educate the public. There's two biggest things that the public can have a direct effect on protecting themselves. One is if you're replacing a battery or purchasing a battery, you need one where your battery itself has a battery management system built onto it. Mm-hmm. So you'll see like a lot of the little flat packs that used to be in the old flip phones, for example, those little flat packs. You'll see a little strip along the edge where the cables come out, and there'll be a little MBS on there. Battery management system. I don't know why the M comes before, but that little, or BMS, however they describe it, that little strip allows the charges coming into the battery to trickle down, trickle up, or shut it down altogether. Right. Versus you letting, let's say it is a cell phone, okay, and I buy one without a battery management system. Now I'm letting the phone try to attempt to regulate the charge rate for that battery. And if those things are not compatible, like if it's not an Apple with an Apple, or it's not a Sony with a Sony type of thing, that ain't going to jive.
Yeah.
Even if it is the same manufacturer, if it's not designed specifically for that device, it will not regulate itself.
Correct. Yeah.
Now, let's say you get a battery that does not have a battery management system attached to it. You put it in a phone that does have a charging, it trickle charges. It'll do its thing. It'll give you the peak times, whatever. But then you go on Amazon and you get that un-UL listed, unregulated freaking charger.
Yeah.
Now you've got two things, 2 out of 3 right there. You're failing.
Right.
2/3 is that fail. It will fail eventually.
Correct. Yes. And so we talked about this before. It's the good luck reinforcing the bad decisions, right?
100%.
Like in the, I guess, good intentions are there, right? But at the end of the day, we have to be cognizant. You mentioned fire prevention. Like, we really have to adapt to what dangers are out there. And I think that departments really need to grasp this concept of lithium-ion batteries and electric vehicle safety, and that needs to be incorporated in a fire prevention program. Hey, listen, I don't want to say we've moved past the days of stop, drop, and roll as the classic, quote unquote, teaching point for fire prevention programs, especially in our schools. Folks really need to be educated about the dangers of lithium-ion batteries, and especially public outreach. Tell parents, listen, this is what can happen. And again, it's not that we're saying that every cordless drill that they buy that's got a battery pack is going to explode in the garage. It's not that every hoverboard is going to cause your house to burn down. But again, it's getting to that idea of Gordon Graham. When this does happen, and when we couple this with the idea of building construction, like, what does everyone want in building construction now? We want an open floor plan. I want to be able to walk into the foyer of my new house, and I want an unimpeded view from my front door all the way looking past my deck into the pond that's sitting out back. You know what I mean? And that's what people want. And then we couple this with the idea of an e-bike or a hoverboard or even an electric vehicle going into thermal runaway in the garage. What is that going to look like? What decisions are going to have to be made on the fire ground when realistically people aren't even given the ability to try to escape from a house fire now because of the rapid fire growth, the rapid fire prevention progression caused by lithium ion into modern building construction. What is that going to look like?
Yeah, I'm glad you just started down that path, because it's...
Is that a segue?
Yes, it's perfect. Perfect. It's like a plant in a crowd. He's getting paid today. Brought to you by Sony. So we've been teaching for the last, at least as long as I've been doing this. So 15 years I've been hearing it, and I've heard it 20 years, a couple years before that. So let's say the last 20 years, we'll gather that together. We've been saying, oh, this new age technology, the new age sofa, the new age shit that we're putting in our house. When it burns, it gives off the big black gas. It's gasoline fires is what I'm sure you've heard some version of that. Lou, correct me if I'm wrong, but everybody's talking that everything's made from hydrocarbons. And we look at the evolution of fire and the timeline. Fire doubles in size every minute. Well, it's not. It's faster than that now. You don't have a chance to get out of your building or out of your house when you have a couch on fire, or let's say a sofa versus a mattress. Jesus, mattress fires, they produce a lot of gas rapidly. And when those gases are trapped in a room and it superheats that room, and those gases get up to the right temperature or get enough oxygen, they'll light. So we see that it's literally a gasoline fire over your head as you're crawling through that stuff. When you're talking with these lithium ion batteries, that's the smallest cell that's in a car battery, for instance, is an 18650. It looks like an oversized AAA battery, AA battery. Yeah. It kind of looks like that. Same size, cylinder, slightly tall. You keep stacking these things together and you create these little packs, and you double up the pack. Now you have this giant, massive battery that goes underneath of a car. And it's all these little tiny, they look like AA batteries.
Yeah, little cells.
Well, that's the same battery that's in a lot of flashlights, for example.
Absolutely.
Police carry them all the time.
Law enforcement, yep. 100%.
We don't carry those in the fire service for a reason.
Right.
We absolutely no. All right. Besides the intrinsically safe BS and all that shit, we just do not have those same batteries. Okay. But you upscale that one way or other. Each one of those cells, when it starts to do that thermal runaway, and this is the only math I'll throw out you, the only chemistry, 8 liters of gas when it gives off 100% in like seconds. We're talking like 4 seconds.
Right.
8 liters. And the biggest contributor to that is hydrogen. I don't know if anybody's seen the Hindenburg video. That's hydrogen. Right, given off. So now when you go from old school technology where you have nice hardwoods in your house, handmade furniture, cottons, and everything, and the fires that people could get out of and everything, and then we go to the more modern stuff where sofas are made from plastics and all these polyesters. Now you got one freaking little tiny battery. It's not as big as a couch. It's not as big as a mattress. And that shit's getting off more gas than that and now it's hydrogen.
Hydrogen. Yep.
You don't have a gasoline fire. You have a bomb.
Exactly.
It fits in the palm of your hand that's inside, that's run away, gives you seconds to get out. So from the point that thing decides, either because of user failure, wrong charging cable, or wrong battery, or wrong implementation, when it starts to go, you don't have minutes to get out.
Yeah.
You have seconds.
Seconds. Yeah.
And
And it's
I was going to say the explosive force from that bomb. There's been 2 videos in the past, I would say 2 weeks, one out of China and one on the FDNY, where the window frame on a project and a window frame out of high rise in China blew out. The one window frame in the FDNY almost landed on a guy, which would definitely took him off the line. If not, it was been a line of duty death. And the one in China, there was footage from another high rise, and this thing blew out yards. Like,
yeah,
way out there.
Yeah.
The explosive force is unreal with these batteries.
Yeah. So 2 points. It's funny you mentioned China. I gave my training to a department. Part of their coverage area is the university here in Buffalo, and they have an international student that joined their department while he was here, getting his degree, getting his education. And at one of the breaks, he came up to me, and he's an international student from China, and he said, it was funny because I show. I try to use a lot of multimedia in my presentation, right? So being able for me to get up there and jaw jack, is one thing, but for me to be able to point out specifically, hey, this is what's going on. Let's view this and actually see what happens. One of the videos I show is from a group of 4 guys that get into an elevator with a e-scooter, and it goes into thermal runaway as the doors close. And you're talking a 6x6 box,
maybe, metal box. We also call those ovens.
Correct. And this goes into thermal runaway. The amount of gas that's produced, the amount of jet flaming that is produced. And I showed that video, and he actually came up to me during the break and said, that video that you showed hopefully is never going to be a thing anymore in China. And I says, well, what are you talking about? And he alluded to the fact that they are now using artificial intelligence in their high-rise buildings to be able to identify e-bikes that are being brought into elevators, and the elevators will become rendered inoperable if AI identifies that you're bringing an e-mobility device onto the elevator for those issues,
Okay.
And I thought it was like, talk about technology. Like, my mind was blown. I'm like, that's pretty wild that you guys are at that point, right? But getting back to the idea of building construction and modern building construction, this is why not only should the dangers of lithium-ion batteries be part of our education programs and fire prevention, but I think some people do, but that whole idea of close before you doze, and I think you guys alluded to that during one of your previous podcasts about, exposures and isolating. And I think that is something that needs to be preached in our fire prevention program. Close the door at night to limit that fire progression, that flow path, that rapid fire spread, because when these go off, you're 100% right. It's a bomb. With the gases that are given off, especially the hydrogen, like seconds. And there are a couple of videos. I'll send them your way. The one that I use that comes out of Colorado. It's a hybrid, a plug-in hybrid that's in a garage. And this department in Colorado gets called for a garage fire, and they make entry through the front door, and they get to the man door of the garage, and they open up that man door, and the whole video is taken from the Axon body cam of law enforcement that's standing in the front yard. The minute that they pop that man door, there is a huge explosion, and it blows the garage door completely off the front of the house and knocks the helmet off the incident commander that's standing in the driveway.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah. So we talk about those buildup of those flammable gases, explosive gases. That's a real thing. It's and it's something that we have to be cognizant of on our fire ground operations now, because vehicles charging in the garage are one thing. And now in New York State, I don't know if you guys have seen this in your area, but the idea of the power walls now within garages.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's going to be another challenge as well.
going back to, we've just upscaled that from your cell phone with its charger. Maybe you're replacing your battery. I know a lot of companies, anything that had Android, just about any of them, allowed you to be able to open it up and replace your own battery.
Yep.
Apple just now got the go ahead to let people service their own stuff if they need to. They still do not recommend it. This was one of the reasons why. It wasn't so that they can get an extra buck off you. I'm sure that was part of the solution,
part of it,
but
right.
it was for this. So now you're going to start to see people going, well, I'll just buy a cheap battery instead of, and then plugging it in. But now going to EV cars, because even I was interested in them. I've been looking at them. I don't think the technology is there for my needs yet.
Right.
But looking at what's it going to cost for the charger at home? What if I want a battery, in the house? Because I do have some solar and stuff. I have free electricity, but I'm not using it appropriately. I could capture that for when we lose power.
Sure.
Do I should be buying all the same brand that works together? It's built to work together and everything like that. But there's so many options out there that for a few shekels cheaper, I can get an off brand or a local brand.
Yep.
I don't know them. Will that adjust to my car? Will it adjust to my solar? Will it adjust to the power grid that we constantly have failure with, that we know is outdated?
Absolutely.
So you have all these, and again, so instead of having one flashlight battery that I'm charging overnight with my off-brand charger, I got thousands of them in my driveway up against my house, because those charge cables aren't 50 feet to put it out near the road.
Right.
I'm setting myself up for failure to begin with.
Right.
I think I'll stick with my, 8 miles to the gallon pickup truck for now.
Right. Yeah. And there's been a bunch of people that have approached me that are like, you know what, I've got a plug-in hybrid and I got the extension cable, because I'll park it 50 feet away from the garage. I'll run the cord into the garage to plug it in, but they don't feel comfortable even parking it anywhere near the structure. Not because it's going to just, going to explode, because that's what they do. It's the whole idea of the potential that's there,
Lou, you got anything else you want to add from the class on that?
Yeah. So one thing I took away, we can't stop the thermal runaway, but what they said, you're trying to stop propagation. So what is and that's just going to take a lot of water.
Yep.
Is there any efficient way of getting water on these battery packs and battery cells safely and efficiently to stop the propagation from cell to cell?
So I think the biggest takeaway there is access, right? Because where are these battery packs on? And here's going to be the challenge. Let's cut that into passenger and commercial. Passenger vehicles probably are going to be a little bit easier for the fire service to deal with, because all things being equal, those battery packs, whether you're dealing with a Volkswagen, a Ford, a Tesla, the battery packs on the passenger vehicles are from front axle to rear axle, the entire length of the floorboard. That's your battery pack, right? So it's going to be an access issue. And if you look at a lot of departments, especially that are coming out of California, because California, I think, has a lot more prevalence of the electric vehicles. And again, I don't want to get into the politics of it, but sometimes it can be politically driven, right? Especially when it comes to dollar signs. And we're seeing that a little bit in New York now, with legislation on the electric vehicles. X amount of vehicles need to be electric vehicles by this year. School, same thing. School buses, I think by the end of, I think it's 2030, 2035. 35, all new, school buses need to be all electric. So when we take the passenger application to get back in terms of access, a lot of companies, and there's no manual for this, right? Like there's nothing that exists out there that says you should do X, Y, and Z. It's really relying on departments that have dealt with these and understanding what their successes and failures are. And I think a lot of companies, what they're doing in terms of access is being able to cant the vehicle slightly to be able to access the entire underside in a safe manner. So we see a lot of examples coming out of California where farm jacks are being used now. Like, how many years did we use farm jacks, and we decided, dude, this is dangerous. We can't be using these things anymore for vehicle lift. And we threw them in the mechanics room in the back. We took them off the rigs. Now I think, farm jacks, are being brought back by some departments as a tool to be utilized to cant these vehicles so that they can get, a hand line, low flow, to be able to cool these battery packs. I have seen nothing in my research that really indicates that the fire department should be penetrating battery packs to be able to flow water into those cells. What I have seen that's a no-go. There's no vehicle manufacturer. And again, the technology, continuously, evolves from day to day. But in terms of safety, I haven't seen anything. So it's really, hey, just getting a hand line on the ground, low flow, and just in cooling, introduce that tick, to understand where your cell is. That's kind of the source of that thermal runaway, and be able to prevent, the domino effect from one cell just moving to the next, and that active cooling again and that is why it takes so much water, because it's, we're not putting these vehicles out with 500 or 750 gallons of water. I don't think that there has been an electric vehicle fire, that I have seen that has not crossed the thousands of gallons mark. And now you talk about where we're getting that water from. We get an electric vehicle on the thruway, on the highway. What does that look like? I know in Sacramento, they've changed their response procedures for electric vehicles. They're bringing upwards of 5 pieces of apparatus now on a thruway or on a highway just because of thousands of gallons of water. So I think to answer your question, access is a huge thing, right? And then getting access to that battery pack, beginning the active cooling, getting a line on the ground, low flow with a tick, and monitoring that is really going to be your best option. We can kind of go into the weeds a little bit about. I know there's a lot of products out there now, misters and sprinklers that you can throw underneath the car. That those exist; those are out there. They're tools again that you can utilize. Electric blankets are out there. You really have to kind of understand, what you're trying to achieve. And I get a lot of questions about a let it burn policy, where departments are just curious as to, hey, what does the language look like if we just wrote a policy that says that we're not going to engage in any fire suppression, that we're just going to completely just let it burn itself out? And then from the instructor perspective, like, that's a decision that you have to make in conjunction with your AHJ. Like, if you want to adopt that, just know that every decision that you make is going to have a repercussion, and it's a tough choice, and that's just on the passenger side. And the reason why we can kind of make those educated decisions on the passenger side is because of this, organizations like the Society of Automotive Engineers, who kind of regulate and develop kind of a standard, quote unquote, across the auto industry. Commercial side of the house is very much different. We don't really have any regulating bodies in terms of electric vehicles commercially. And this is kind of the problem with school buses or larger mass transit. Our battery packs in all electric buses can be on the complete roof of the bus, where if you see videos from, probably the most common that people will see where it kind of caused issues was in Paris, in France, where they had 3 of their buses going to thermal runaway over a period of, I want to say it was maybe a month and a half, and they took their entire fleet offline. And they said, no go, we got to figure out what we're doing here, because this is going to cause, an issue in terms of, injury and death if we don't figure out how we're going to deal with these situations. They can be on the roof. They can be at the complete rear of the bus. They can be between the axles. They can be behind the driver. So there's really no standard by which commercial vehicles kind of follow. There's companies that exist out there right now where if I own, a company that maybe I'm a delivery service company, and I can take my fleet and have it retrofitted to all electric. Why would somebody do that? Well, because there's money there. We talked about that political and economic impact of that. There's money behind that, where companies are getting incentives to go all electric. And part of that is retrofitting. I know that there are some utility companies that are retrofitting their service trucks. They look like a regular internal combustion engine. You would never know that they were completely powered by batteries. And there's no indication of that as well. So that's the challenging part. especially on the commercial side of the house. Passenger vehicle, we can get there. And I talk about the acronym ION, identify, operate, and notify. Identify that you have an electric vehicle, which is paramount, because that's going to drive your decision making from there on out. Once you identify, you need to operate according to an SOP or an SOG. And if you don't have one, you need to get one. You need to sit down, you need to have a conversation. You need to identify what the risks are, what your AHJ says that they want to accomplish when it comes to an electric vehicle. And then you need to make your notifications, and those notifications may be additional mutual aid. It may be additional resources, additional manpower. It may be your hazmat team. It may be that you need to have somebody from your county hazmat or your local hazmat. They come out and they do, water runoff monitoring, air monitoring. Or it could be the DEC, where the state DEC comes out and they do their monitoring to figure out what is the environmental impact to the runoff that we just had from this vehicle fire. I hope in a very long-winded way that answers your question, though.
No, it's good. Yeah, I like that, the ION thing. I might have to implement that. And I saw Matt taking notes over there.
I did, yeah. Got it down. It's kind of funny because so that's the second time. No, not funny, but this is the second time.
Funny?
Yeah.
Do I make you laugh?
Yeah, exactly. It's the second time you've mentioned the water runoff and all that monitoring. And we are well equipped, I think, as a fire service on the whole. Not every single department might be, but there are already plans in there that do implement stuff like that, not just for our regular hazmat, but also for, like in the case for us where we work, not far away, we have a nuclear power plant. And there's really, there's not one up here anymore, but where we work, that's part of our plan. And we have to do that once a year and go practice that stuff. And it's, washing cars, people doing that whole evaluation and knowing what's in that water when it runs off, depending on which part of the ring you're in from that fallout, the initial fallout or activity, the nuclear activity. But now we're pulling from a nuclear industry or a nuclear issue, and we're modeling it onto something the size of a car, car, or just a freaking cell phone.
And I get that question all the time. Wild. Like, is an electric vehicle fire now considered a hazmat? I would tend to believe, you at least need to make that consideration, right?
Where we work, our county policy it's an automatic hazmat. And that's something people have to be cognizant of. You need to be aware of that. And it's funny because this class that existed that I kind of developed for fire departments has branched out into law enforcement. So I'm starting to teach law enforcement now with regards to lithium ion and how to protect themselves, because we all know that usually in our world, the volunteer world, law enforcement is usually the first ones there, so how can they help us? How can they help themselves in terms of, safety, being prepared, things like that. Dry comms are not going to do anything, police officers.
Man, dude,
it's actually super dangerous.
Yeah, keep your 5-pounders in the trunk of the car. We don't need to empty 15 of them, onto a car, trying to save the day. It's just not going to work, and you put yourself more at a risk, right? Yeah. Especially with those gases. The gases. The hydrogen, hydrogen fluoride, hydrogen cyanide, we don't need that stuff, And
most of us don't know how or have the capability to monitor that stuff, even if we are in what we would call an overhaul stage.
Absolutely. And let's talk, that's a great point. We have a vehicle fire in a garage, in a home, this is super important now for air monitoring during our overhaul and making sure that we're keeping our stuff on during that overhaul process. It's not just the cancer, it's now all of the lithium ion batteries that exist in there that are off gassing all of the stuff, that adds to it, not saying that cancer is not a bad thing, but there's a lot more now, and can we actively air monitor, what is that going to look like now in terms of overhaul, and protecting our people?
Yeah. It's going to be our version, our generation's version of, asbestos,
Right.
Got cancer from a car, call William Matar.
Right. Something like that. Right.
Guys out of nowhere, out of Western New York are going to get that joke.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
But, all right. Well, it's kind of this is super interesting and informative because we've gone from going way at the beginning. We'll sum this up because we are kind of running a little low on time here.
Yep.
seeing where you came from, how you developed yourself. And like I said, what you bring to the fire service, not what the fire service made you. It's the other way around. And I love seeing those types of people, because those are our power hitters. Maybe in a small distance, just in the shadows, but you're slowly coming out further and further and making a huge impact, because you've taken this idea of what is it going to take to move up in the chain to lieutenant? What is it going to take to move up and become an instructor in-house, instructor in the county, to the point where you've developed a whole new program that now you're delivering to multiple agencies that cross outside the fire service.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not just talking at the state level. You know, that's pretty cool. Even your work's pulling you in, going, hey, we heard you got this program.
Right.
You know, so now we're talking federal level is next.
Yeah.
You know,
it's,
where do you see yourself going in the future? Presidency or?
Yeah, no, decline. You know, I don't know. It's interesting to see how things evolve. You know, you never know what door is going to open. And that's kind of a takeaway from the leadership perspective that we talked about, you know, earlier. You never know what's going to happen. You may have a plan, which is good to have, right? Like, hey, I know that I want to get from point A to point B. But how you think that you're going to get there may not necessarily be. You may eventually get to B, cool, but there's going to be some zigs and some zags along the way. Some successes and failures. You know, I always wanted to teach. I always knew that was kind of where I wanted to go, but it was not necessarily on my timeline, and it wasn't necessarily on the way that I wanted to get there. Not necessarily good or bad, but it was just understanding that. And I think that's kind of a good takeaway is be prepared for the zigs and the zags, take things as they come. And just, you got to roll with the punches, you got to adapt, but you have to be motivated as well. You got to be motivated to understand the bigger picture and what you're trying to achieve, you know, because
and you don't half-ass anything. So if somebody puts something on you and say, hey, we need you to take ownership of this, not necessarily because you chose it,
right?
You're going to do it to the fullest of your capabilities.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely. You know,
it's hard. There's a lot of people like that. I think that's what makes a great instructor overall. And that could be a boss. It could be, you know, whatever, but being able to take something and actually run with it, not half-ass it just to check the box and go. It's like taking ownership, even if it's something that you don't like. I'm not saying that's the case, you know, that you don't like this, but
right. Yeah, it's and it's tough too. Like we get a lot of folks that want that training, you know, and it's tough for me. We talked about this idea of saying yes and saying no. I love delivering this to folks because it's something that they want, right? So I don't even have to put a hook out there. Like I just put electric vehicle lithium ion, and I know that I'm going to get people walking through the door just by topic. So now it's my responsibility to make sure that game is stepped up, because with a good topic coupled with a good instructor means that you got a dynamic training. People are going to be coming back. And I've had people come back and revisit just for, you know, refreshers, you know, hey, what's next? What's on the radar? Where are we going from here? Charging stations is kind of a big thing now that are starting to pop up everywhere. The power walls, you know, they're starting to pop up now because Tesla's made those available in New York State over the last couple of years. So those are kind of like relatively new. So we're talking about, yeah, do we deal with lithium ion in electric vehicles? Yep. But now there's more stuff now. So seeing that update is it keeps me on my game, because now I'm getting even more questions than I did before. You know, hey, what's the latest? What are you seeing about this? People are doing more research. And overall, that contributes to a good instructor, right? Is not necessarily that people are trying to challenge you for the sake of challenging you, but they're challenging you because they want more knowledge for themselves. Like they want to walk away educated. So as an instructor, you know, on your game consistently, keeping up with the updates, with the changing culture, changing environment, changing technology to deliver a good product, you know, so that the end result is you have people that leave the room that are taking away something that they didn't walk in with.
That's amazing.
Good
Lou,
stuff.
anything else?
No, all good stuff. Enjoyed the conversation.
Awesome.
Yeah, I feel like we could actually go down even further on this rabbit hole. I know you don't want to do the science, so we will back off the science. But
we could do the science. I just don't know how much of a contributing factor the non-science guy.
We're going to need a whiteboard out here.
Yeah. Oh man, love the whiteboard. Right. No, but I appreciate you guys. I mean, it's great to be able to sit and talk about, you know, the fire service, something that I think a lot of people are passionate about, that I'm passionate about. Learning new things, hashing out what our successes and our struggles are. I think it's really important. And continuing that mindset of, always learning and taking away, even as an instructor, taking away something, from the engagement of other firefighters, students, candidates, whatever you want to call them. And even from, other instructors, other chiefs, other mentors and things like that. It's important.
Well, thank you very much for coming on. It's an honor having you on, and I think this is great, showcasing your process. And I bet that be willing to bet there's a lot of people out there that get stuck at certain avenues or little crossroads, and what should I do next? And using these examples might help guide them. So this was awesome. Thank you. Cool. There's a lot of people out there. I'll thank you for it. You bring a lot of stuff to the table, and I'm glad. Would you say 23 years? Man, that's a long time. It's a long time. It's a lot of service. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, appreciate you guys. Appreciate the facilitation of the environment, through the podcast. It's great. I've been listening to it over the past while, and it's you guys are just, again, hitting it out of the park. So
just a couple goofballs with microphones.
Yeah. No, man, it's great. We talk about those home run hitters. I'm sitting in the seats of the ballpark waiting for that swing and that crack across the over the fences. So it's fantastic.
Appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
So with that, Lou, you got the Instagram. How's that working?
It's up there.
It's up there. Okay. You don't want to comment?
Okay.
Too soon?
I already commented earlier, so It's up there. I'm not going to take it down. I'm not, it's up there. I'm not going to hide from it. I might put some out there, maybe a video, because context is everything, and apparently some people don't understand context, but
that's okay. You know what? Yeah. Not everything's going to be crystal clear in the fire service. Obviously, it's like 40% of the job.
Yeah.
But if anybody was willing to reach out, wants to talk, wants to hash out some comments, concerns, or gripes, we'll take them. You can hit us up, either DM the Instagram at Fire from Two Windows, or send us an email at firefromtwowindows@gmail.com. They're all spelled out, no letters. Or Jesus. It's all spelled out, no numbers. There we go. Maybe good thing we didn't do that math. All right. That's where you can find us as the two main platforms. Other than that, like, subscribe, share this podcast with other people, spread that conversation. We are on YouTube now. Yep. We are forwarding all our stuff over onto YouTube so that we can reach more people. And that's where a lot of this stuff generates. We get a lot of questions that come in. It helps generate our conversation and guide us. So, Paul, thank you again.
Thank you, guys.
Lou, we'll see you later. And with that, everybody, be safe.